I'm here today because we are going to go back in time before numbers. So we're going to look at what prehistory might have been like and why numbers may have evolved and how they may have evolved. Okay. Why are things created? Let me ask you that. Why do we create? Why do we create? Yes. Because we need, right? They serve, usually we create things because it serves a purpose. We need something. Yeah? Any other reasons? For convenience, efficiency, right? Efficiency, convenience, what else? What? Nice and loud. To be able to explain things, to communicate, absolutely. Okay, good. But there was a time that there were no numbers. Imagine a world without, think about everything that we take for granted. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Many, some. Think about how numbers are used today. First row, third row, senior year. So much of what we do is quantified and even qualified through numbers. Think about our computer systems, right? Computers now run so much of what we do and see and are on a daily basis. And what's the background code? Come on, computer guys, what's the background code for all computer languages? Math, what kind of code? Binary code, right? And what's binary code made up of? Zeros and ones, ones and zeros, that's it. Where did the first one come from? Is there an actual zero in nature? No. The null set? The closest thing, right? So what is a number? We'll go to basics. Harrison, what's a number? It's a way to quantify an amount of things. Good. Thank you. It's a word, right? A number is a word. What is counting? How do you define counting? Say it again? Keeping track, being able to order things, right? These are things that we do all the time, but when you're asked to actually define it, it's a little bit harder, right? So a number is a word that expresses how many. And counting is reciting numbers in an order, okay? So now let's think about ourselves as human beings, right? The evolution of the Homo sapien. What separates us from animals? Do animals have intelligence? Other animals? I see a lot of this. Who thinks animals have intelligence? How do you know? Name some smart animals. Wait, what? I can't hear. Dolphins? Primates. What are primates? What other animals show intelligence? Dogs. Okay, so yes. Chimps, absolutely. All right, I want you to discuss with your partner, talk to your partner, and write down some tools that animals may use. You may not know, but think about it. Maybe your partner does. Okay. When you think about smart animals, did anybody think about the crow? No? We all underestimate the crow, let me tell you. Who said crow? Why crow? Yeah, they're scary smart. Crows, the next time you see crows, just know. Yeah. Do they have facial recognition? They do have. Can any of you, if you see a murder of crows, right? That's what we call a flock of crows, a murder of crows. Can any of you pick a crow out of a murder? Like, let's say a crow is sitting right here and then he flew away. Oh, there he is. Can anybody do that? We can't do that. We cannot do that. But they could do that. Okay? I'm actually going to show you a little video.
Crows have this amazing ability to recognize individual humans, but how do they do it? Can they distinguish body shapes or our hair or smell? Maybe it's our face. Professor John Marsloff of the University of Washington asked his students to put on a caveman mask, one of those cheap Halloween masks, when they caught and tagged wild crows. That way the crows would see, fear, and maybe remember the particular caveman face. Then Professor Marsloff asked all kinds of different people to walk across campus wearing the same caveman mask. But these people had never, ever tagged a crow. And yet, whenever crows saw that mask, whether it was on a skinny young man or a big older man or a woman, skin color didn't matter, size didn't matter. Every time they saw that mask, crows let loose a series of angry caws, as in, watch out, that guy is a bad guy. But just in case it was something about the mask, its smell, its shininess, whatever, Professor Marsloff purchased a Vice President Dick Cheney mask. He gave that mask to volunteers to walk across the campus looking like Dick Cheney, and the crows, who had nothing against Dick Cheney, they just sat silently. But perhaps the most startling evidence that faces do matter came when Professor Marsloff asked his volunteers to rotate the caveman mask and walk through campus with that face turned upside down. Marsloff reports that some crows, as they flew by, actually turned upside down mid-flight to get a better look at the caveman. Very strong evidence that crows distinguish humans by faces. Which leaves the final question, why? Why can crows recognize our faces when we can't recognize theirs? Well, maybe it's because for tens of thousands of years, crows have needed to tell us apart. One person might feed them, another person might shoot them, Professor Marsloff says, so it pays for a crow to pay attention. While we people, we aren't threatened or helped by individual crows, so they need to know about us, but we don't need to know about them individually. And that's what I call the crow paradox.
This story of, Zach said it right, they can recognize your face. So a professor did a study at a university to see if this was indeed true. And what he did was he had someone put on a mask and do something to a crow to upset the crow, okay? And then, so the crow didn't, he just saw the mask. And then, I guess even a day later, the person came out with a mask on, and the crow started cawing at him, trying to attack him. And then they went further, and they said, all right, well, let's try this mask on different people, because they weren't sure exactly what the crow recognized. And so they put the mask on small people, bigger people, little people, a child, a lady, a man, and the crow responded to the mask. So whoever wore the mask was attacked, sort of, by this crow. And then they went so far as to turn the mask upside down. And according to this, and I think the source is pretty credible, the crow flew upside down and then saw the mask and got really upset. But went so far as to turn around because he recognized the face. That's pretty smart. So the next time you see a crow, just be aware. Birds use their beaks. There's a video I could share with you another time of a bird sitting at a shoreline watching the little fish come in and watching and watching and watching, and he tried to get him. And then the bird walked away and got a piece of bread and threw the bread in the water and watched and watched and watched and then caught the fish. So the bird, a finch, knew enough to attract the fish by giving him food. That's pretty smart, right? And so he was using, and then he used his beak as a tool, okay? And of course the chimpanzee. We all know the chimps are probably closest to the human beings in intelligence and ability. And I think, do they have opposable thumbs? The chimps? Yeah? I think they do. Yeah. But they've done studies with chimps. Can they count? Okay, so can a chimp count? And they have another great video that I'll share with you of showing a chimp numbers on a screen, 1 through 9, or 0 through 9, but they're not in any order. They're randomly mixed up on a screen, and they're each in little boxes. And I don't know what they did to teach the chimp first, but they gave the chimp a peanut every time the chimp was able to get it right. And what the chimp had to do was touch the screen and then touch the numbers in order. So picture a touch screen and picture a chimp doing this. He did it in a flash, faster than I think I could do it. His movement was just so quick. And they kept flashing the numbers up on the screen in different places, and every time the chimp got it right. The chimp got it wrong once, but that's pretty good, really good. I don't think most human beings could do it that quickly.
Japanese researchers have revealed the results of a fascinating memory test. They pitted young chimpanzees against grown-up human beings. Now, does that sound like a fair contest? We counted on Bill Blakemore to find out whether it was.
First test. Can chimpanzees count from 1 to 9 in the right order in return for a peanut or other tasty reward? Yes, they can. Now, if you just flash the 9 numerals for a moment, then cover them, can a chimpanzee remember where each numeral was and still get the order they were in right? Yes, for another tasty treat. This chimp got this wrong once, but only once. Now, if you flash just some of the 9 numerals, then cover them, can a chimp A, remember where each was, and B, in the right order, even though some were missing? Yes. Now, can another primate species, the adult Homo sapien, do the same? Well, okay. And again? 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 One more try? Well, okay. But actually, chimpanzees did much better than humans in this flash and remember test, leaving the Japanese human researchers scratching their heads. One possible theory: chimpanzees care more than humans about peanuts. Bill Blakemore, ABC News.
All right. So here's where we are now. Are we born with number sense? Bolin says no. Jack says no. Think about how babies, toddlers, and children learn about their world, learn about numbers specifically, right? Think back, maybe you remember when you were a small child, or maybe there's a small child in your family or a friend, or you've been babysitting. Think about how that child interacts. When a 1-year-old has their birthday, at least in my family, every adult is going 1, 1, 1, right? And you want that child to go 1. And some children will do that. Do they know what they're doing? No, but they're starting to learn language and symbols. This is a symbol. And then when they turn 2, when they're 1, they're not saying 1. But when they're 2, the most exciting thing a parent or a guardian could hear is 2, right? When the child says 2. And when they say 2 and they do this, they put the word to the symbol. Do they know that that means they've been alive for 24 months? Of course not, right? And so it goes on. And then they learn how to count, right? And then think about, you don't learn how to add until you can count. So all of the actual identity of the cognitive development of the stages of growth was only put into theory within the last 100 years. And we owe a lot of what we understand today to Jean Piaget. Who's heard of Piaget? If you go into education, if any of you decide to go into education, you will most likely study Piaget, because Piaget is held in high regard as the person who developed or identified the development stages of human beings. And he broke it into these groups. He was a philosopher. So he talks about the first group between infancy and then into the beginnings of being a toddler, right? If you show a baby about 6 months old an object, they will focus their eyes on the object, and by 6 months they will want to grab the object. But if you take that object away, they're not going to look around for the object because they don't understand object permanence. They don't understand that once it's gone, it still exists. Okay? At about 7 to 9 months of age is when you could hold an object in front of a baby, and if you drop it, they're going to go like this. That's a huge development because now all of a sudden they recognize that object still exists and it must be on the floor. So we all learn in these ways. And then we go from into the next stage, which we call the preoperative, the interactive period. 4 to 6-year-olds learn their whole world by touching and doing and counting. That's why they have blocks and manipulatives, and they start organizing and grouping. If you watch a 2.5-year-old, all they want to do is group things into a box, out of the box. This is all beginnings of numeracy, understanding numeracy. Can they count them all? Do they have a formal way of describing it? Definitely not. But it's starting. And then if you ask a 6-year-old, I'll tell you a story about my daughter in a second, because I have a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old, so I do observe them all the time as mother and then as educator. I can't help myself. And I'll tell you what my 6-year-old did in a minute last night, but just recently, a 6-year-old, a few months ago, she said, we look out east in Montauk, and the moon was big, and she said, I wish I lived on the other side of the lake because they could touch the moon. So they don't have an understanding of distance and time, and the moon looks so big, she figured if she just went over that lake, it would be touchable, it would be in reach. And then my 8-year-old rolls her eyes and goes, why does she think that way? Because the 8-year-old is in the next stage of development. She's starting to understand more concrete things. She's starting to do operations. Think about when you were in elementary school. You learned how to add. And then you learned the difference between adding and subtracting. Right? And then you learn multiplication. So you move through these more formalized processes into more sophisticated styles of communicating quantity. And then you moved into the abstract. You moved into algebra. That can't happen developmentally for most kids until they're about 11, 12 years old. The whole idea, even some of us now, right? Even today, it's like, what do you mean X is a number? It could be any number. That's hard for a lot of people. What do you mean it's a variable, right? So it's after that age that we moved into where you guys are, where we, into this whole idea of abstract thinking, multivariable, right? Think about when you're dealing with 3 or more variables. Whoa! All right? But this is all developmental. And the reason I'm talking about all this, and the reason our curriculum is designed this way, because there is a link as to how we individually develop as human beings to the way the first people may have evolved into our very sophisticated society that we have now. So what I'd like you to do with your partner is look at the pictures down at the bottom of the page. Okay? You need to come up with your partner of a way of describe how many are in each little picture without using numbers. So one of you will do 3 of them, or do 4 pictures each. 4 pictures each. All right, so look at your sheet with your partner. You're using these. Do any 4. Someone do the top 4, someone do the bottom 4. I think there might be 9 though. Okay? No numbers. How are you going to describe how many are in there? All right, let's choose the trees. How did you describe the trees? Ava, how did you describe the trees?
Okay, we did tally marks.
Tally marks. How many people use tally marks? Oh, you smarties. Tally marks work. And how did you do the tally marks? Just 4 lines?
For 5, you just draw a line.
Oh, for 5 you draw a cross? Why do you draw a cross for 5? You could tell by 5s if you put a cross across 4, so it becomes like a bundle. Oh, that's smart. Anybody else? So you use shapes. Oh, like for the 4 trees, did you use a 4-sided figure? What's that called? Square. Quadrilateral. Right? Okay. Anybody else use something different? You were going to use something different. What did you use? Did anybody use these? Why not, right? Did anybody use these? No, there weren't enough things up there. Did anybody use their fingers, right? Who thinks the first humans used their fingers to count? I think it's a very good possibility. Now I will share with you what my daughter did last night. So she was adding, all right? So she had 5 plus 2. She's 6 years old. Listen up. 5 plus 2, and here she is doing this. And I don't like this, but she's doing this. 7. Great. And now my 8-year-old's rolling her eyes, going, I could do it in my head. I said, that's because you're 8. And then Nina got to 6 plus 7. She ran out of fingers. So guess what she did? First, she was frustrated. She goes, I can't go past 10. And then she threw her foot up on the table. She didn't have pantyhose on. She threw her foot up on the table. I said, get your foot off the table. I said, all right, for now, keep your foot on the table. And she counted her toes, and she got it. And she did it. And it's so cool to actually watch that happen, you know, for the first time, or one of the first times. So she's using her tools. She has to go from the concrete before she can go to the abstract. My 8-and-a-half-year-old could do the abstract. Not all the time. Depends on what it is. Let's say you were going to go see your friend play at, your friend's a musician, and they were playing at Bay Street. Bay Street. And they kind of knew what they're doing, and you were concerned about how many people actually showed up to the show. And you asked your friend, another friend that went, how many people came? How many people were there? You would say what? You would say a lot, a few, some, a few, right? You wouldn't say there were 39 people there, right? No one's going to count the number of people in the audience. So my whole point of bringing this up is that sometimes we have words that represent groups of numbers, or that could generalize, right? There are tribes today around the world that still do not count past 2. After 2, they use the word many, or they don't use our word many. They use their own representation. So there are still tribes that are high-functioning tribes. They are very sophisticated in other ways. They can make that gorgeous basket, intricate detail. But they don't have a need for numbers.
Meet the Walpuri of Central Australia. They're people who've been minding their own business here for 30,000 years or so, until some anthropologists came along and noticed that they didn't use numbers.
People get very interested in Walpuri because in our language we don't use numbers. We have a word for 1, but that's about it.
Until recently, the Walpuri have got by without using numbers. How on earth have they been able to manage?
The things that you do in your world are done differently here. Take Tabulary here. He never grew up with any numbers at all. Never Tabulary. I'm not Martida. Chintra. Calamity Dam Kurolo. Pun.
Begin.
Japple Joey names his grandchildren. What he doesn't say is four. It's just not in his vocab.
Done.
Older generation Walpiri don't talk in terms of exact times of day, just the position of the sun. They don't even deal in distances because their land is mapped out not with numbers but with songs, which contain all the information they need. These timeless songs, deeply rooted in their culture, are a source of huge national pride.
I should be so lucky, 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 lucky in love. I should be so lucky in love. Oh yeah, I should be so lucky, lucky, lucky.
The fact is, in traditional Walpiri life, they didn't really need a number system, let alone arithmetic.
With Ms. Clark in cultural history, you have learned about possibly the oldest tool that has been identified as a counting tool. Who remembers what that tool is? Is it a stick? What kind of stick is it? It's a bone. Yes? Oh. Well, now what was the name of the bone? The Ishango bone. And it might have been a femur bone. Your femur bone is in your thigh, right? It's one of the bigger bones you have. That's why I call this big boned. Okay? So the Ishango bone. Where was the Ishango bone found? In caves? Okay. Where? Where was it? Africa, right? Central Africa. How old is it? 25,000? Yes. Many years. Many years old. It's about 25,000. And I just want to point out something else. I was reading about the Ishango bone. Oh, these are also, by the way, these are tribes today that don't have a formal counting system besides 1, 2, many. So a lot of you were using tallying for your pictures. The Ishango bone, it's a tally system, right? They're using tallies as counters. There's also proof that they're using or identifying prime numbers. Do you all know what a prime number is? Who knows what's a prime number? Jack, what's a prime number? Yes, right? Prime number. Only multiplied by, the only ones that multiply to give you that number are 1 in itself, or divided by. Okay, so there was a prime number set. That's really sophisticated. For 20, I have 18 to 20,000 BC. There's question. It might have gone to 25,000 BC. And you know what? This is another thing I want to point out. We become immune to big numbers, right? When I was reading this, I'm going to be honest, and I was like, all right, 20,000, 25,000, what's 5,000? 5,000 is a lot. 2,000 years ago was ancient Greece and ancient Egypt and Pythagoras. That was 2,000 years ago. So imagine, when they're trying to figure out the age of these, that's a big difference. There's a lot of evolution happening. Okay, but the Ishango bone, similar bones were actually found in different parts of the world as well. And I think I'm correct in saying that the bones that they found were not of bones of animals that were from that area, from what they think as well. Interesting. Okay, so the Ishango bone. And then, so this was the first counting system. And then a huge jump in evolution. What do you think maybe the next step was? What's the next step? In counting, we were far from using numbers yet. Symbols. What kind of symbols? Well, maybe picture the civilizations evolving and becoming more sophisticated. And as they became more sophisticated, they may have wanted to start trading things, right? I have 5 cows, you have 3 sheep. Let's make a trade. Or I'm going to buy that wheat. They didn't say buy, right? What do you think they use? What would be the next step? What do we give children to count with? We give them counters of all different kinds, right? We give them blocks. We give them pennies, Pennies. Think about currency. Okay? So there's a huge evolutionary step. They have found tokens, okay, that date back to about 9,000 to as early, close, now we're getting a lot later, to 1500 BC. And the tokens represent, you can see how they're different shapes, different sizes, different tally marks on the tokens. So perhaps, and most probably, they represent different quantities. That's up, now we're getting more abstract, okay, and more sophisticated. And that's what eventually leads to our currency, right? And now, you guys, since you were probably born around 1998-ish, right? 97, 98, 99, 97, 96, excuse me. Money has been electronic since have been alive. It's been all electronic. As far as moving it through banking, global trade, it's all been electronic, okay? So now we've moved beyond that by far, right? Now it's all digital. Okay. This is a really interesting thing. I'm going to show you another video because there are still tribes today, like Nina counted on her toes and her fingers, and like we still do sometimes, right? If you're trying to keep track of something, you might do this. There are tribes today that use multiple knuckles and joints to count. Today.
In my language, we count 1 up to 37. 1 up to 37. So this is Menage, Hage, Iki, Tubu, Haba, Dama, Kunoiki, Koipo, Karohabo, Amene, Gi, Geno, Hero, Fufu, Kia, Bobo, I, To, Gizi, To, I, Bobo, Kia, Fufu, Hero, Geno, Gi, Amene, Karohabo, Koibo, Unegi, Dama, Kaba, Tubu, Iki, Hage, Nanage. So we count from 1 up to the other one. That's called 37. So we count from this finger to this finger. That's all here.
We also differentiate between the value of a number and the placement of a number, okay? Does anybody know the two different names of the types of counting that we do or the number systems that we use for value versus placement? Liv?
I was going to say Arabic.
What is it?
The Arabic number system.
No, our numbers are based on the Arabic number system for sure. But there's two, this is a difficult question. Cardinal versus ordinal? Have you ever heard of cardinal versus ordinal? You know what they are, you use them all the time, but you may not know them formally, okay? Today is the 18th day of the month, right? We can count up to day 8. Today is day 18. That would be a cardinal way of describing today. The ordinal way of describing today is September 18th. Okay? So we have these two different systems, and they are valuable at different times and different places, depending on the way you want to describe things. Okay? You learned as children. Well, it depends on what culture you're from, and I would love to hear what other cultures do. We count potatoes. Go figure. 1 potato, 2 potato, 3 potato, 4, 5 potato, 6 potato, 7 potato, more. What do you have? What do you do? Something like that? Who in their culture, if you come from a different culture, you speak a different language, who knows something like this, but it's different for where you're from? You have one. Nice and loud.
Like this, we count kind of small, like this.
You count the bumps on your knuckles?
Yeah,
Oh, cool. Interesting. Okay, thank you. All right, so we have the cardinal system versus the ordinal system. The ordinal system is when you say first, second, third, fourth, fifth. That's an ordinal way of counting versus cardinal way of counting. Okay. Here's the difference. Cardinal numbers rely on mapping and relates to amount. The number or symbol is analogous to the elements in the finite set. Ordinal numbers rely on the idea of succession and relates to the placement in a specific order. You could express degree, quality, or position in a series. I came in first, he came in second, she came in third. Just to recap, like you all know, right? You all know all these things that we count on our fingers, we use tallies, we use tokens. Tokens evolved into more sophisticated tokens that eventually evolved into currency. Right? And then eventually into the numbers that we know today. What are you doing, Bolin? Tell me. It's uncomfortable doing that, isn't it? I think it's uncomfortable doing that. I wouldn't say 4. What kind of system do we count in? Decimal system. We have a decimal system. What does that mean? We count, huh? It's based on 10, right? We have a base 10 system. Ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s, right? And if you go less than 1, if you go into fractions and you look at the place values, you have tenths, hundredths, thousands, right? So we are on a 10 system. Has anybody ever learned a different counting system, a different base? Has anybody ever learned a different base? 60. Binary. Who knows binary? Who has a good idea of how binary works? That's for a different lecture. But Gabe does. Yes, you do. Bolin might. Bolin, do you know? Alan, do you know? Did you learn binary? Do you know binary? You know binary. All right, binary, zeros and ones. It's a different counting system. Okay. The Egyptians used a base 5 counting system. I'm going to teach you how to count and multiply using a base 5 system using your hands. You ready? Everybody go like this. Jazz hands. We'll go back to all that. Okay, the Egyptian counting system works like this. You can count on your hands in base 5. Let's say you want to multiply 9 by 7. Okay, we're going to use this for 9 and this for 7. You turn the number of fingers down that 9 is 4 more than 5. So I'm going to turn 4 fingers down. This represents 9. How many fingers am I going to turn down to represent 7? 2. Turn down 2 fingers here. So you have 4 fingers turned down here. Okay? Okay. How many drop fingers do I have altogether? How many fingers are dropped altogether? 6. Multiply that by 10. 60. How many fingers do I have left? 3 and 1. Multiply them by each other. 3 added to the 60. 63. We all know 9 times, I hope we all know that 9 times 7 is 63, but if I do the Egyptian counting system of base 5, that's how it works. Okay? All right, with your partner. Here's another one. Here's another one. You all know that 8 times 6 is 48. Right? You know 8 times 6 is 48. Represent 8. 3 down. Represent 6. 1 down. And then what do you do? Huh? 6 is just 1 down. 8 is 3 down. Here's my 8. What do I do? I'm going to add these up. I have 4. Multiply it by 10, you get 40. And you're going to multiply 4 times 2. 8, 48. It works. Isn't that cool? All right, with your partner, guys, what I'd like you to do is turn the page. Turn the page to the back, please. Give them a number, and the other person has to show you how to multiply. Base 5. So turn to your partner, choose a number, write the number down, or just show them on your hands. Show them on your hands what number you're thinking of. Who understands what I'm saying? Okay, thank you. All right, so try that with your partner. I want to go back to tell you about a couple of things. Who could tell me what musical scale we use, well, a musical scale that we use today? I'm going into uncharted waters a little bit because it's not my specialty, but what kind of what scale do we use? Huh? Diatonic? No? Does anybody play the flute? Who plays the flute? You play the flute? No. You play the flute? Oh, Dale plays the flute. How many holes are there on a flute? It's 8, right? How many keys? There's 8 holes on a flute. How many keys are there in an octave on a piano? 8. Whether you're playing the flute or you're playing the piano, I'm not sure about a guitar. We work on a scale that we call the diatonic scale, okay? We have proof that Ptolemy and Pythagoras also identified very similar scales to the ones we use today. And if we go back even further, now we're talking about 35,000 to 43,000 BC. This is thousands of years before the Ishango bone. Okay? This is an artifact that shows that the marriage between math and music was identified 43,000 years ago. Okay? They like to use bones because they were hard, right? So this is called a bone flute. And it's actually, and if you look at the number of holes, I think, is there 7 on there? Looks like 7. But their placement provides the perfect fifths pitch that we know of today. That's really, really sophisticated thinking. So you have to think about it. Even though they may not have had a language, or maybe they did, we don't know, a language to describe the numbers, maybe not everybody could have created this back then, but there were people that could create this and realize it was music, and then people that could play the music from this. Okay? So, and these were found in the Swabian Alb region. I don't know that region. Is anybody from around that region? In Germany. Okay. So this is one of the artifacts. This is, again, the Ishango bones, the bone flute, dating back thousands and thousands of years before that. All right, a proof of a mathematical mentality. You probably all recognize these. Well, maybe not the numbers, but I know in piano you have middle C, right? C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, and it goes on and on. They're broken down in what we call perfect fifths. And this is the fractional scale. A lot of people don't like to work in fractions. Who feels that way? Who doesn't like to work in fractions? You don't even like to work in fractions? Yeah. I prefer not to, right? I always try to go for the whole numbers if I can, or decimals. So to get rid of, how did you go, why was this multiplied by 72? Come on, math people, or everybody's a math person. You just got to find it. Why did we multiply by 72 to get all those whole numbers? Least common multiple. Very good. Yes, so the least common multiple, the way to change all those fractions to whole numbers, by the way, a little math and math, is to look at all the denominators. 8, 4, 3, 2. Okay? So these have been called the Venus figures, but these were also, we're going back again to 28 to 25 BC. Okay? The whole mythological term Venus happened millennia after these were created. So now there's controversy about the name, right? Now they want to call it the women instead of Venus, because Venus was a term that was created way after that, okay? But what's interesting about these, and these were found all over the world. I think the oldest is the Venus of Willendorf, which is the middle one, right? And right now that is, it's about this high. It's in, I was reading in the museum, in a museum in Austria. And what's interesting, why am I bringing these up right now? Because in studying these, it has been noticed that the way they're created, their ratio of scale of body parts fits the diatonic scale. You guys are going to hear from William Irwin Thompson in a couple weeks. When is he coming? A couple weeks. And he is convinced that these fit the scale perfectly. I don't know. I'm not sure. But it's interesting that even when they were creating art and these artifacts, that there was ratio scale to the figures, right? And then thousands of years later, we identified another perfect scale, a perfect ratio. Thousands of years later, what ratio is that, Gabe? The golden ratio. What Greek letter do we use to represent the golden ratio? What's the Greek letter? Phi. Some people might say phi. All right, phi. Who knows what phi is? It's the golden ratio. What's the value? 1.61, or you could change it to a decimal, depending on, yeah. We're going to look at the golden ratio more when we move into the geometric mentality, okay, which is going to be our next mentality. Because after, as you all know, the arithmetic came the dawn of this geometric mentality and thinking.